Hello, hello. Hello, everybody. Could you take your seats, please? We'll be starting in a minute or so. Anyone else coming in? Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome to beautiful Sheldonian Theatre. My name is Michelle Morphetis, and I'm delighted to be representing White River Manor here at the Masters Conference as a co-sponsor of the intermediate psychotherapy track along with Innisfree Therapy. It's a privilege to be here for the next 3 days, and I'd like to welcome the participants in the room and also to those who are joining us online. White River Manor is a beautiful holistic recovery destination for substance abuse and mental health issues on the edge of the Kruger Park in South Africa. I'm a psychotherapist here in London and also work with clients and their families before and after treatment to help people on the recovery journey. If you'd like to hear more, please come to us down here or at our stand. Enough about that now. And it's my great pleasure, and indeed a real personal privilege for me, to introduce Richard Schwartz today. His work I found invaluable personally in my therapeutic journey, personally and professionally. And I mean that, I really do mean that. We're in for a great treat. Richard C. Schwartz, PhD, is the creator of Internal Family Systems, a highly effective evidence-based therapeutic model that depathologizes the multi-part personality. His IFS Institute offers training for professionals and the general public. He is currently on the faculty of Harvard Medical School and has published 5 books, including No Bad Parts, Healing Trauma, and Restoring Wholeness in the Internal Family Systems Model. Dick lives with his wife, Jean, near Chicago, close to his 3 daughters and his growing number of grandchildren. I just need to give you a small plea. There'll be time for questions during the presentation, but Dick really needs to leave straight away to go over to a book signing, which is 15 minutes away in the examination schools. So if you'd like him to have a selfie or do a book signing, please join him in the examination schools. And please could you respect that it takes a little time to come over and also land from doing the talk. Thank you for that. And without further ado, thanks very much and welcome to Dick.
Great to be back in this amazing theater and back at this amazing conference. And thank you, Michelle. And I looked up and I realized God is watching, so I better do a good job. Yeah, it's amazing how popular IFS has become, and to see all of you here in this full theater is really gratifying. So I don't have a lot of time. I want to feature a video and then talk a little bit before that. So how many of you were at my thing yesterday? It was a great time. I really enjoyed that group. How many of you don't know much about IFS? Okay, good. So I'll do quite a brief introduction to it. I'll talk a little bit about how to work with quote-unquote complex clients, and then I'll show this piece of video. So I'm going to take you back in time about 41 years now. I'm a young, obnoxious family therapist, because we all were that way back then in the day. We really thought we'd found the Holy Grail with family therapy, and tried to prove that by doing an outcome study. And don't ever do an outcome study if you want to hold on to your big assumptions about therapy, because it didn't work. And out of frustration, I began asking these bulimic kids why they binged, and they started telling me this language of parts, which was totally foreign to me at the time. But luckily, I hadn't been schooled in traditional psychoanalytic or psychodynamic theories, so I really had to come with what the Buddhists call beginner's mind and get just curious about what they were talking about. And at first, I made the assumption that most of the field still makes, that these parts are what they seem. So the critic in these bulimic kids is some internalized parental nasty voice, and the binge is an out-of-control impulse. And when you think of them that way, it is a complex process to try and help them, because you're going to want to get them to ignore or fight the critic. You're going to want to get them to control the binge, which is what I set out to do in the beginning. And then I was taught very quickly that that was making things worse. Long story short, one client cut herself. I was so frustrated with the cutting part and tried very much to get it to stop doing that. And she got a big scar on her face as a result. And I just collapsed, and out of pure desperation said, I give up, I can't beat you with this. And the part said, I don't really want to beat you. And that was the turning point in the history of this work, because I shifted out of that controlling place to just being curious. Why do you do this? And the part talked about how when she was being abused, it needed to get her out of her body and contain the rage that would get her more abuse. And I shifted. That was the big turning point in the history of this work, because now I have a kind of appreciation for the heroic role it played in her life. And I can convey that to the part, and the part broke into tears because everyone had vilified it and tried to get rid of it, and finally somebody's listening to it. And talked about what it protected and so on and so on. And so tried the same process with other bulimic kids and then other kinds of symptoms, and lo and behold, all of these parts that are seen as so full of pathology and evil turn out to be good parts forced into extreme and often very damaging roles. And that's one of the big paradigm shifts that I'm trying to bring to this field, that there are no bad parts. That's the title of my last book. And that's held up well over 40 years. And there was a point where I thought, okay, maybe the bulimia part and maybe the critic aren't bad, because I was learning about how they were desperately trying to protect. But what about people who've really hurt people badly? What about murderers and sex offenders and so on? And so I reached out to that population. Lo and behold, those parts had their secret histories of how they got stuck with these, what I'm going to call burdens of extreme beliefs and emotions, and frozen in time back when they were being abused, and were stuck with the energy of the abuser and wanting to hurt vulnerability. And we're really still trying to protect the client, because that younger part they protected was frozen in time back in the past. So then I could conclude there are no bad parts. And I didn't know if the model seemed to work with these bulimic kids, but what about the really tough clients? So I was in a department of psychiatry, and I actively asked for clients that fit the categories of borderline personality and PTSD and DID and so on, and tried it out. And it was harder, more challenging. I had to be more innovative, but I learned so much from those clients, because they are so clear about their parts. They're so articulate about their parts for reasons we can get into as we go. So I do have a long history of working with quote-unquote complex clients. And a lot, as I learned, those clients become a lot less complex when you don't think of them as having these diagnoses. The DSM for me is a fairly accurate description of clusters of protective parts. That's all it is. But if you are working with somebody and suddenly you think, oh my God, it's a borderline personality I'm stuck with, how are you going to react? What part of you is going to come forward? How pessimistic or hopeless are you going to feel, or overwhelmed? How much are you going to medicate your client? So on and so on. But if instead you say, oh, okay, there's a lot of trauma in there, there's a lot of what we call exiled parts, so yeah, of course this part's going to come raging out at me for something I didn't really do and push me away. Of course that's going to happen. And then of course this other part's going to get terrified and cling to me and want to pull me back in. And of course I'm going to be caught in that polarization inside my client. You have a totally different attitude about your clients. Does this make sense? So that's what I'm trying to bring, is a different paradigm for understanding the mind that is non-pathologizing and actually very empowering. And it actually helps your clients to understand, I am not sick, I just have these protectors, and they're not bad either. They're just trying their best to keep me safe. Does this make sense? Yeah. It's a tough sell. It's been a really tough sell. I developed this. I was in a department of psychiatry at the University of Illinois at Chicago, and I did a grand rounds to an audience of white lab coats, and the guy got up and said I was dangerous, I was fragmenting people and tried to get me fired. So it's been a long road to get to this point. And traditional psychiatry still doesn't pay any attention to this, as far as I can tell. So that's my take on complex clients. The key, really, for all these kinds of situations is for you to hold what I'm going to call self-energy. So let me come back to the model again briefly, particularly for those that don't know much about it. So after those experiences I just described, it does turn out that everybody is a multiple personality and that that's a good thing. That for me, these parts they come into the world with us. They're there for good reason. They all have valuable and different qualities and resources to lend us and help us in our lives. And trauma and attachment injuries and all the slings and arrows we suffer force them out of their naturally valuable roles out of their naturally valuable states into roles that can be destructive, like I said, but are all designed to protect, except for the parts that you might call inner children, who we love before they get hurt, because they give us all kinds of precious qualities like openness and creativity and playfulness and love and desire for connection and so on. But they're also the most sensitive parts of us, so they get hurt the most by the betrayals and rejections and traumas and so on. And they then take in these extreme beliefs about themselves or about the world, and so they now carry the burden of worthlessness, maybe, or the burden of terror, or the burden of emotional pain, and the belief that the world is very dangerous, and that people are dangerous, and no one can be trusted, and so on. And these burdens they get injected with from these experiences then are like viruses. They really drive the way the part operates from there on. And once a part, like what I'm going to call an exile, gets burdened that much, it has the power to overwhelm you and make you feel all of that and make it hard to function a lot of the time. When you are overwhelmed by that, there's a natural tendency to get away from it and to lock it up inside. And so most all of us have what I call exiles, which are these formerly lovely inner children who, by dint of just being hurt or terrified or so on, get locked up and isolated and abandoned by you for decades. You think you're just moving on from the trauma. You're just getting away from the memories and the emotions, not realizing you're distancing yourself from your most precious qualities. So these are what we call exiles. Some of them didn't come from trauma. Some of us grew up in families where certain parts weren't acceptable, so we had to exile those to survive too. But most all of us have a bunch of exiles. When you have a bunch of exiles, you feel more dangerous, you feel more delicate, the world is more dangerous, because so many things could trigger that. So other parts are forced out of their naturally valuable states to become protectors, some of whom are desperate to preempt anything that might trigger your exiles. So they are the parts that are scanning for danger all the time, the parts that are trying to make you lovable or trying to make you look great so you don't get rejected or perform at a high level to counter the worthlessness or so on and so on. Many of them become these inner critics because they don't know what else to do but to yell at you, to try and motivate you to stay safe. And they're the parts we love to hate because they can be so nasty sometimes. But they're just trying to get you either to achieve more and be perfect, or to not take any risks and stay small and don't get out of the house, just whatever it takes to keep you safe. So those we call manager protectors, one class of protector. And we've all got a bunch of those, some of which are quite extreme. And other systems call this the ego, maybe. And they're trying their best, but despite their best efforts, the world has a way of breaking through those defenses, triggering your exiles. And when that happens, it's a big emergency. For some parts of you, it feels like you're going to die if you stay in this state. Because that's the way you felt back in the time. And there's a part of you that still lives back there, still frozen in time. In fact, most of your parts are frozen in time, such that if I had you ask a part how old it thought you were, which if we had time, there are exercises to do that, you'd get a single digit. Most of these parts think you're still a little kid and think the world is still as dangerous as it was back when you were that age. So, you get triggered, flames of emotion threaten to consume you. So there's another set of parts who are on standby and immediately go into action to take you away from those flames, or to get you higher than them, or to douse them with some substance, or to distract you till they burn themselves out. So we call those parts firefighters. And in contrast to the managers, they're reactive. They don't care about the collateral damage. They just got to get you away from those feelings, whatever it takes. And if we watch this video, he has a very violent firefighter. And it took over to the point where he was in a conflict with a business guy, and he found himself driving in his car with a weapon. He was going to take this guy's legs out. And then he kind of caught himself and pulled off the highway. But yeah, there are many people that have those kinds of violent firefighters, but there's all kinds of other firefighters, including the addictions and so on, and including parts that are driving you to perform. So there are some that are very socially sanctioned, even though they're no less extreme than a bunch of the others. So that's the map of the territory. And again, if you take some DSM diagnosis of complex something, I could give you a very simple description of that and also a roadmap to how to change it that is very safe. It actually works. So, now the big deal about IFS is that in addition to these parts, and I just stumbled onto this discovery because of my background in family therapy, and I was hearing about this system as if it was an inner family, where there were parts, inner family members that were constantly fighting with each other and polarized, and some were allied with each other against others, and like in families, some of the kids were locked away and isolated, and some were scapegoated in the inner world too, and so on. And so I started to try to change it the way I did external families, and that involved a lot of getting these parts to actually face each other and talk to each other and So I began trying to do that, and I found that I could do that for a while, but at some point, one side or the other would get extreme. And it reminded me of family sessions where I'm trying to get two family members to talk, and a third one jumps in and sides with one against the other, and it gets extreme and doesn't go anywhere. So I began asking clients, is there a part that just jumped in that's doing the talking about this, in his case, this violent part that is afraid of it or hates it? And people would say, okay, yeah, I see there is. Could we ask that part to give us a little space to just get to know it? We're not going to give it more power to take over. We're just going to get to know why it's so reactive and maybe even help it not do that. And how's it been going the way you've been trying to deal with it? And they'll always say, no, it's not working. So would you let us try something entirely different, which has to do with just getting curious about it? And if I'm persuasive enough, and if I'm in what I call self enough, parts will open the space, and spontaneously say some version of, the person will suddenly say, yeah, I'm just kind of curious about it, or even I feel sorry for it. Seconds earlier, they hated it, they were terrified of it. The simple act of getting parts to open space inside seemed to release this other person with these C-word qualities, two of which I just mentioned. What did I mention? Curiosity and compassion, but also said from a very calm place, whereas they weren't calm seconds earlier, or confident relative to the part where they were terrified of it earlier, or they wanted to connect to it, where they wanted nothing to do with it seconds earlier. So these are what we call the 8 C's of what I call self-leadership. And the big deal about IFS is that that self, with those C-word qualities and several others, is in everybody, can't be damaged. It's just beneath the surface of these parts, such that when they open space, it pops out spontaneously and knows how to heal, wants to heal, wants to create healing, both in the inner world and the outer world. Can't be damaged by trauma. No matter how much trauma you've suffered, that same self is still in there. And I can only say that now, 41 years later, having worked with people that had horrible, horrible, horrible lives. And just the act of getting parts to open space, it's just like the same person. So I had to shift in my thinking about self from traditional psychology that says you have to get those qualities from your parents or someplace, it's not in you. And so now it's become much more spiritual. That for me, this, what I'm calling self, is a drop of the much bigger ocean. And that's why it can't be damaged. That's why it has all these qualities. That's why it knows how to heal. And that the more we can bring this kind of self to this planet, the more the planet's going to heal. So that's become my bigger mission now. And I'm trying to do that at larger systems more and more, working more and more with leaders to try and do that. So that's the big deal about IFS. And the way we do it, I'll be illustrated in the video, but very briefly. The person comes in. One of the things I like about this video is he doesn't know anything about IFS when we start. So you'll see how I introduce it and get him going with it. So you do that until he can identify this violent impulse as a part. And then I'm asking, how do you feel toward it? And I'm getting any parts that are afraid of it to step out. And then I'm getting him to be nice to it, listen to it, and appreciate it. And then we're learning about what it protects, which is a part that makes him feel totally powerless because he had a horrible childhood. He was taken away from his original parents for abuse and adopted by, I think they were missionary people, and they couldn't handle him. So they gave him to an institution, and he grew up in an institution for most of his childhood. And it was a very constraining institution. So that's where we go. We go to this little powerless guy who's stuck in that world. And then with IFS, not only do we see that exile, but we also get him out of where he's stuck in the past so that he can unload these extreme beliefs and emotions he got from those times. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Jake. Again, this is my first meeting with him. It's in front of an audience, and he has a therapist who's not using IFS, so he doesn't know much about it.
I realized that because I was seriously considering doing something to this guy, and whether it was having somebody else do it or me doing it, and I was able to just realize it just wasn't worth it, that he's not worth my time, you know? So I guess
doing something to this guy, or have somebody else do it, and then I suddenly woke up and realized it wasn't worth it, and so on. Yeah.
in that respect, it helped me decide ultimately that I definitely wasn't going to do anything physical to him.
That's right, yeah.
So.
Well, he sounds like the kind of guy that, I can understand.
Right.
Doing something to.
Right.
But the part of you that really wanted to, that did take over and was driving, how's it going with that part now? You know what I'm asking?
You mean the way I felt and...
Yeah, the part of you that really wants to hurt him. Now that you've decided not to do that, do you still have that sense of that part of you in there, or is it kind of...
It's still there, it's just, it's a different tactic.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm going to use, I could probably find 25 people that he's sued over the last 3 years or threatened to sue. So we're gonna, I'm gonna get everybody together and see if I can do a class action lawsuit against him, or go to the New York Attorney General's office, Better Business Bureau, FTC. Completely different tactic to revenge, if you would. And I don't even know if it's revenge. I just feel like somebody needs to stop him from doing what he's doing.
Yeah.
And I feel like everybody else is completely intimidated by him, and I'm not. So I'm just going to use a different tactic.
Okay, sounds good.
So the aggression, the physical aggression part, and the wanting to harm him physically isn't there. But I still feel like somebody needs to stop him.
Yeah.
And I feel like everybody else is scared to do it. So
Okay.
I'm going to do it.
So, do you know anything about the kind of work I do?
I don't at all.
Okay. So I help people with parts that they have trouble controlling, and so if you're interested, we could try to get to know that one that did take over and was going to hurt them, and see what we can do to help it, because it sounds like what you've done so far is kind of talk it out of that.
Right.
And get it to relax and trust you more.
Right.
Does that sound right?
Sure.
But it still would have probably that hair trigger reaction in a similar situation.
Right.
Does that sound right?
Sure.
So if you're interested, that's one of the things that we could do. That
Okay.
would be helpful to you.
Sure. I'm not sure exactly what it is, or why I, had such an extreme emotion that way. I don't.
Yeah, but that's what we find out. This is a
Right.
kind of internal process that
Okay.
you don't have to think about it. We just go in and we ask some questions,
Okay.
and then the information starts to come out.
Okay.
But it does involve a kind of inner focus for a period of time.
Sure.
How does that sit with you, that idea?
I'm comfortable with it. Sure.
You game for that? Okay. All right. So I'll lead the whole thing. There's not a lot you have to figure out.
Okay.
All you got to do is what you're doing, which is to get comfortable.
Okay.
And so see if you can remember that impulse. If you can remember the desire to really hurt him.
Okay.
And as you do, see where you find that feeling, that part of you in your body, around your body.
Okay.
Do you have a sense of it?
I do.
Where do you find it?
Right in my heart.
Right in your heart, yeah. As you notice it there in your heart, Jake, how do you feel toward that part of you that wanted to hurt him? Do you like it, or are you afraid of it, or do you respect it, or do you want to get rid of it? How do you, what's your
Like I need
relationship?
to protect it.
You want to protect your heart. Okay. So does it feel like that violent part is trying to protect your heart? Does that
Yes.
sound right?
Right.
Okay. So your heart is pretty vulnerable,
Right.
and this violent part is really trying to protect it. Does that sound right?
Yes.
Okay. So as you know that about this violent part, how do you feel toward it, knowing it's really trying to protect your heart?
Say that question again.
Yeah, good. So, as you get that this violent part is trying to protect the vulnerability in your heart,
Right.
how do you feel toward this violent part?
Like it's a protector.
Yeah. And knowing that, how do you value it and like it, or?
Absolutely.
Okay. So this might seem a little odd to you at this point, but I'd like you to focus on it and just let it know you value it and you appreciate its attempts to protect you,
Okay.
and just see how it reacts to that appreciation.
Okay.
And if it helps to close your eyes, you can do that, but you don't have to. It's up to you.
Okay.
So just go inside, focus on it, and in this inner world, just convey that appreciation to it.
Okay.
You don't have to say anything out loud. It's just let it know that you value how hard it's worked to try and protect your heart. And just see how it reacts to that protection, that appreciation. Do you get a sense of a reaction?
Comfort.
It feels comforted
Right.
to be valued by you.
Right.
Okay, good. That's really good. And as you're doing that, see if there's anything more it wants you to know about itself. And don't think of an answer. Don't try and figure out the answer. Just wait for something to come back to you. Just ask it if there's anything else it wants you to know about its attempts to protect or its violence. Just see if anything comes. Nothing?
Just pretty much reassuring me that it's there to protect.
Yeah, that's right. So it's just letting you know if it's needed, it's there and it's going to do what it needs to protect you. And how does it feel to hear that from it?
Good.
Feels
Safe.
good. Yeah, it makes you feel safe. So it's kind of comforting to know that it's available if necessary.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe ask it, what was it like for it to take over that way the other night? And what was it like for it to have you take that exit? Just ask how that was like for it.
For it to take over, meaning.
Well, it got you in the car and you were...
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Okay.
Right.
And then I kind of took the reins away from him. And
Yeah, so
kinda
that's
took
what I'm
the exit.
asking.
Right.
What was it like for it to take over and then have you kind of pull the reins away?
Right,
Just
right.
ask it that.
I guess it felt like it needed to take over for a minute.
Mm-hmm. So does
It just felt like I was powerless.
Yeah.
And I couldn't protect myself.
Yeah, yeah.
So it had to step in and take over, you know.
That's right, of course.
And then it was completely okay with me pulling the reins back. And,
So it kind of was relieved that you took over.
not relieved, but just You know, I can have the reins anytime I want.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, great. So it was reacting to that part of you that feels so powerless sometimes.
Right.
Is that right?
Right.
And it was going to say, I'm going to take over so you don't feel powerless.
Right.
Does that sound right, Jack?
Right. When I felt like I couldn't defend myself, it was there.
Right. That's right. Like it said, it's going to be there in case you need it. And it decided you really needed it then.
Right.
So let it know we get all that. Okay?
Okay.
And I have a question for it now.
Sure.
If we could go to that part that feels so powerless at times,
Thanks.
and we could heal it so it wasn't stuck in places where you were powerless, and we could actually unload that feeling of being powerless, would this protector like that? Would it like to not have to react and have to do this in such a violent way?
I mean, the moment you said it, I felt like it feels like it needs to be there just in case.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally get that, and we wouldn't want it to go away.
Right.
But would it give us permission to try and heal the part that feels so powerless? That it protects? No? It's okay. It says no.
It's not that no, I'm not sure.
Yeah, but ask it about its fears about that, of letting us do that. What's it afraid might happen if it allowed us to go to this powerless part?
I don't know. It feels like it needs to be there, you know?
Yeah, it's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it can watch, and all I'm asking is that it if it's willing to allow us to go and heal that one who feels powerless. And I can tell you what that would involve if you want.
Right. It just feels like it's extremely protective.
Yeah.
And it's hesitant to want to let anybody do anything.
Totally. Totally get that. And
Right.
we're not going to do anything without its permission.
Okay.
So it's the boss in there. I promise.
Okay.
So, and I totally get why it would take that position
Right.
and how much it's needed to protect you in your life,
Right.
especially from what I know of your life.
Okay.
Okay, so just tell it all that. So we don't need to do what I was suggesting at all.
Okay.
But if we did, I just want to describe what we would do. Is that okay?
Sure.
So if it were willing, we would focus on that powerless feeling,
Right.
and I would have you get a connection to it, and so that it trusted you. And then we would ask where it was stuck in the past. And it might show you a scene or give you some feelings, but I would make sure you weren't overwhelmed by all that.
Okay.
And then once you got what happened in the past to make it feel so powerless, and it felt like you really get it, I would have you go into that time period, and we would get that younger version of you out of where it's stuck back there, and then we would unload all that powerless feeling. And that part of you would no longer be so triggered by jerks like him.
Okay.
And then this violent guy might be able to relax more. He wouldn't have to do anything really different, but he might not have such an impulsive reaction. Does that make sense?
It does.
And he's the boss. We're not going to do anything without his permission.
Right.
So just see how he reacts to all that.
Yeah, I mean, it's fine. You know, it's willing to explore anything, but it just go anywhere, you know.
No, so it doesn't need to go anywhere. So let it know that I appreciate the trust, and it can watch, and if at any point it feels like it's too much or we're doing it wrong, it can stop us.
Okay.
Okay? That's good with that?
Yes.
All right, Jake. So focus on that powerless feeling that you felt at some point with this guy, and see where you find that in your body, around your body. Where do you find it?
In every fiber in my body.
Yeah, okay. How do you feel toward that guy who feels so powerless sometimes?
I'm not sure.
In other words, do you try to stay away from him, or would you like to get rid of him, or do you feel sorry for him, or how do you feel toward that powerless part of you?
It's interesting because I accept a lot of powerlessness.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like literally all I can change is myself, and what I do, think, and say.
Right.
So I accept that powerlessness.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, in life, I really feel very, very little powerlessness, and I feel like there's extremely little, like almost never do I feel that powerlessness. So it's hard to be able to tell you how I feel about it, or how I feel about that powerless person.
Okay, I understand that.
It's very, I don't ever really feel it.
Kind of foreign these days.
I haven't felt it in, I don't know, like maybe 15 years. It's
Yeah.
been so long since I felt that powerlessness.
So this was the first time this guy triggered that in you for all of
I
this
haven't had
time.
it in a long time.
Yeah. Okay, so that totally makes sense, that it'd be kind of foreign right now.
Right.
So if you can't access it, that's okay.
Okay.
The thing is, it's still there, that powerless guy. Can be
Right.
triggered by somebody like this.
Sure.
So if we could access it, we can get it out of where it's stuck and we can heal it. So let's, if you have permission still, let's give it another shot.
Okay.
So I'll lead you through it again.
Okay.
So once again, just focus on that feeling you had when this guy was going to do this to your girlfriend and to you. And didn't look like there was anything you could do about it. And let me know when you're back in touch with that feeling.
Okay.
So you can feel some of that powerlessness.
I do. It's the powerlessness is so almost overwhelmed, I guess, for lack of a better word, by the fight or flight.
Yeah,
I feel it, but they're
by the protector.
right.
Yeah.
It's hard to get to that powerlessness. It's hard
Yeah.
to.
So that's what we're asking. We're asking for this protector to let us get to the actual powerlessness,
Okay.
so we can heal it. And just see if he'll step back a little more and relax a little more, so we can actually get to that very vulnerable part of you. And it's okay if he's not up for that.
All right, this might take me a couple of seconds.
Yeah, no rush. Just take your time. Take your time. It's a delicate negotiation. I don't know why that happened.
I think it just wants me to know about all of the powerlessness.
Yeah.
And all of the I guess when you it's hard to put it into words, I guess. I mean, I guess when you spend a good, I don't know how many years it was, 17, 18 years behind locked doors and feeling powerless every minute. There's just I guess that's where it brings me to, is that I guess it wants me to go there, you know.
Yeah, is it okay to go there?
Sure.
Yeah, so let's do that. Just tell the part to take you right there. So 17 or 18 years behind locked doors. Tell to let you feel and sense and know everything about how bad that was and how powerless he felt.
Okay.
Is there a particular age that's coming, or is it the whole time period?
Yeah, there's an image that I always tend to go back to.
What is it?
I can't, oh, thank you. I don't remember exactly how old I was. I guess it's something that I think about periodically. And I guess for some reason it was a time in my life where I probably felt the most vulnerable, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
You sure you want to hear it? It's pretty...
I'm good for it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I was adopted by these military people. And they were stationed in Guam. And I think I was in Guam, and I think it was called the Yale Psychiatric Institution, and I think I was like 3 or 4 years old. I think it was a very early age. Mm-hmm. And it was my first mental institution.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I remember, I'm sure I remember this, but I don't know if it was the first day I was there or not, but I have this vivid memory of, so I'll tell you what I remember.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it was the first day I was there. And Mr. and Mrs. Brooke took me there. And I had this bear. I call it Honey Bear. And I don't remember not having the bear. I remember always having the bear. It was like the only thing that I had that was consistent.
Mm-hmm.
So I always had this bear. And I remember, like, literally going to this mental institution the first day, and I feel like I was immediately put in a seclusion room upon going into this, I don't know what I call it a nut house, but I vividly remember being put in this seclusion room, and I'm holding on to the ear, the ear of my honey bear.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't let me have it.
Oh my God.
And they were taking it away.
Yeah.
And I remember holding on to it, and I wanted him so bad.
Yeah.
And I remember it coming out of my grip, and they shut the seclusion room door, and I was there, and I was alone.
Yeah.
It was all I had.
That's right. That's
They
right.
took it away,
That's right.
and I didn't know why I was there.
So, Jake, how do you feel toward that 3 or 4 year old boy right now?
I don't know.
How do you feel toward him? As you see him there, how do you feel toward him?
I feel terrible.
Feel terrible for him?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I want you to go into that scene in that cell, that room, and be there with him in the way he needed somebody. So just tell me when you're in there with him.
Okay.
Okay, you're there?
Yep.
How are you being with him?
The way you would be with a 3-year-old boy, I guess.
Perfect.
Just, happy and, playing with a 3-year-old boy the way you normally would, I guess.
And how's he reacting to you?
The way a 3-year-old boy would, happy and...
He's happy to have you there.
Right.
Okay. But we do get the boy out of there, and we help him unburden, and then we bring in the violent guy to see the change. We're almost there. We're almost done.
Okay.
So, Jake, I'd like you to invite that violent protector guy to come in and see that this boy is not so vulnerable anymore, and just see how he reacts to that.
Okay.
How did he react?
Confused and lost.
Yeah, that's right. So tell him that if he wants to, and there's no pressure, he can start thinking about a different role, something else to do with all the energy he carries, and just see what he might be interested in if he didn't have to be so protective.
Okay.
Did he have something in mind?
A few things.
Good. So tell him that that's where you're headed. You're going to free him up to do something you'd rather do. He wouldn't have to leave you vulnerable. He could still be that protector when he needed to, but he could also do this other thing that he might prefer. How's that sound to him?
That's good. I guess you felt like it was a lot of work to be
On guard all the time? Yeah. So let him know you get that. He's probably very tired.
okay.
Yeah. Okay. And then before we come back, Jack, just see if there are any parts that having reactions to our having done this and to you having been so vulnerable in front of people and anything like that. Just see if there are any negative reactions to what we've done.
I guess the only, just a sense of fear that goes along with vulnerability.
Hmm? Say more about the fear. Fear of judgment?
Oh, no, not judgment at all. It's, when you allow yourself to feel vulnerable in some way,
Right.
then you're allowing the possibility of harm.
That's right, yeah.
Right.
So let those parts know we get that this was a huge risk relative to what they usually allow.
Right.
Does that sound right?
Right.
So it's natural that they would be afraid that the other shoe is going to drop at some point and
Okay.
that you'll be hurt.
Right.
Let them know I'm not going to. Don't have more time, but reassure them about that. I'm not going to hurt them. Nobody in the audience is, and so on. But I show this because this is what we can do for people, these violent impulses. And we actually have a big grant from the state of Washington to work with perpetrators of domestic violence. And it's just and there are a number of people using IFS to try and change the judicial system and the punishment system in the U.S. And what if we could turn prisons into healing places like this? Because, as we know, trauma is behind all this stuff. And people literally can't control a lot of these parts the way he couldn't, or he did ultimately, but some people can't. And so just a few minutes for some questions or reactions. But basically, for those of you new to the model, we always start with a protector. In this case, it was the violent guy. We appreciate him. We don't try to get him to change. And then we ask for permission to go to what he protects. And we heal that, and we come back to him, and then we help him into a new role. So, yeah, the mic is over here. Okay.
Hello. When working with clients with DID, I found that when doing IFS with them, sometimes they say they're afraid that it's going to create more parts for them to manage in their system. And I'm wondering if you have any experience with that and how I could help.
Well, it won't create more parts. It might release more parts that have been locked up. And that could be a problem. So you want to empathize with that. But as you can see, when I was reassuring, I become what I call a hope merchant. So I'm telling these protectors, I get that, but we can handle that. Like, he was afraid of being overwhelmed. I said, I can handle that. We're not going to let you be overwhelmed, and so on and so on. So we have ways to negotiate with these protectors. So if new parts come up, we'll just help them. It's okay. Yeah.
Right. Have you ever worked with a client with DID that they were fighting with each other, the parts, the alters, and the fact that there were more to deal and manage with when they were already so overwhelmed with their other ones? Were you able to use IFS to help with that?
Yeah, again, it's family therapy. These parts are fighting with each other. A lot of times they don't know each other at all, and each one is afraid if they back down, the other one's going to totally take over. And so just like in a family, you go to one and connect with it and make sure it knows you're not going to let the other one take over if it relaxes, and then ultimately bring them together and have them talk directly to each other and work something out. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for this. My question is, When working with a client with depersonalization, significant depersonalization, how do you access their parts when their protectors are naturally barring them from connecting with themselves?
Yeah, again, things like depersonalization or dissociation or all the things that are seen as signs of pathology are the activity of protective parts. So I would work with the part that does the depersonalization. What are you afraid would happen if you really let her stay and feel and go to these places? And sometimes it takes quite a while to convince the part that it's safe to not do that.
How do you convince the part to not do that? Because I have several clients with dissociation, depersonalization, that really their parts are very, very protective and really difficult to get deep.
And again, that was my population for 20 years. And so it just takes not having an agenda, like I did with him. I kept saying, you're the boss, we're not going to do it without your permission. And then I start saying, but if you're afraid of this, this is how we'll handle that. And if you give us permission, we can heal all this stuff, and then you'll be free to do something entirely different. And you got to say that 30 times sometimes in different forms before these parts will give permission. But if you can be in self and they really trust you, ultimately they do. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're
Appreciate
welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for a magnificent talk. It was lovely to hear you. So there's no time for book signing here. It's straight over to the examination schools, and Dick's going to go over there. So if you could respect that, and we'll be back at 1:30. Thank you.